it's okay, and you should have those negative points in planning, in looking towards the future, and answer those questions, because that's where you can make a change, rather than, to your point, just saying we'll grow by X amount, when that is clearly really, really hard to do in a certain economic time.
That's the thing. It's the planning stage is the part to be critical and pragmatic. Better to work those things out and get things wrong on paper and then literally be at the drawing board, rather than have people on site digging holes and footings and everything else, and then realize, oh no, this isn't going to pan out. I've read all kinds of things on deep drilling underwater tunnels connecting one mass of land with another, and literally those getting flooded. That is a big, expensive problem to then try and fix. And in some cases, more cost effective to leave a half dug tunnel and all the machinery down there and then start again. Hello and welcome to episode 101 of Construction Disrupted. Peter, how are we this week?
Yeah, all rosy in the construction disrupted garden at this moment in time. No party popper this week, unfortunately. Although listening back and watching back, you couldn't even hear the party popper. So there was a party popper for those that listen in audio format, and for visual, I don't think it was that spectacular. So episode 200, like we were saying in episode 100, will be far more visual and spectacular. So stick around.
Yeah, we have 99 more episodes to find adequate sponsorship to cover the level of pyrotechnics required for episode 200. So yeah, please get in touch. Yeah, and we've got I think it's going to be an interesting episode this week. We were just talking off mic, as it were, that we've been very stat heavy the last couple of weeks, and possibly it's the time of year, forecasts and people looking forward and so on. A little bit away from that and into some of the human side of the sector this week, which I'm looking forward to. I don't know if we dive right in on that one with a piece in building last week. Should we start there?
Yeah, I think we should.
Perfect. So building run these sort of in-depth interviews with senior figures in the industry. They're a fascinating read generally. The latest one in particular, I shared on LinkedIn last week from Chris Ball, who's the president for the UK and Ireland for AtkinsRéalis. And the format, for anyone that hasn't looked at these things, it's kind of the CV is covered, the sort of journey through the sector to this point, but there's always some really interesting sort of underlying angles on how that senior figure sees the sector at the minute. And one thing in particular that really stuck out, so Chris was asked about how you see the sector for 26. Nuclear mentioned as, energy efficiency and government's investment into, obviously, the nature of what AtkinsRéalis do is very much on the infrastructure side of things. What I found fascinating, and it's something that we've kind of spoken about a little bit before, Peter, is this idea of government as end client and kind of the answer to a lot of the sector's problems by pumping all of this money in. But Chris Ball takes a really, really interesting stance in that it's now up to the sector to deliver on this, and that, well, one of the key ingredients seems to be self-belief and the potential knock-on effects of that. So for all of AI and other kind of practical implementation sort of tools are being held up as the way that we're going to deliver, actually the sector's sort of doing a little bit of inward reflection and sort of picking up some confidence and actually getting the job done. It's a bit of a tonic, actually. I found. I don't know what you thought of the article.
Yeah, very, very similar to what you were saying there, and just digging a little bit deeper into it. Yeah, it gives a bit of his background and history there, and he's got a lot of experience from the nuclear sector, which he brings with him. One of the sound bites, and there's a couple of sound bites this week, and this is a good one, and I think there's one coming up in our last story which isn't as good, but we'll get to that when we get to that. A little bit of light humor. But he says, if we delay, I think we potentially lose interest. People start to question. And I think that's right in any walk of life and anything that we do or see. If you're buying a house, if you're looking to purchase anything, if you put it off, on the flip side, somebody's seeing that from the opposite angle. Are you really that interested in this purchase? Are you really interested in doing this thing? Because you keep putting it off. And if we're looking at larger projects, then that's amplified because it affects everybody in the UK or England or wherever it might be. So what he says is we need to move with pace and stop delaying, which I think he's got a really good point in that, and that it's all about this self-belief that we can have within the industry. And he mentions that as always in life, the losses are always more magnified than the wins.
Mhm.
And what he's saying is that we always seem to focus on these negative parts
Mm.
rather than the positive things that have been built and have gone successfully. And we've covered a fair few of them in this podcast that have been on
Yeah.
time and on budget, you know?
Mhm.
So it is really interesting read, and the angle that he comes from is, I think he's bang right. We need more self-belief, and I think it's more about being pragmatic and realistic first and foremost, and then move at pace, rather
Mhm.
than like we've seen with our mega project friend HS2. It started with this grandioso thing, and then it's scaled back and scaled back and scaled back, and people have lost interest and certainly lost confidence because of that.
And I think that was, again, confirmation bias being what it is. We've spoken before. Everyone listening to this will know that you and I are marketers by trade, and therefore kind of
Mm,
view things through that particular prism. But my interest and our initial discussion, in fact, so the thing that brought the two of us together was talking about the reputational impact of that lack of delivery, those delays, those overruns, the sort of negative headlines that generates in mainstream press, and what that does for us as a sector in the way that we're viewed. I think what's interesting here is considering that in terms of the psyche of the sector, that kind of that negative reinforcement in some respects that, I know we've agreed this deadline, but we're probably going to overrun. I know we've agreed this budget, but we're probably going to
yeah,
overspend. I know there's this positive spin around what this piece of infrastructure will deliver, but it probably won't end up being like that. Yeah, I mean, I guess I've been guilty of that sort of outward looking, what does this do from a recruitment point of view, a retention point of view? But yeah, I hadn't really thought much about what that means to the sector, that kind of negative reinforcement. So to hear
mhm,
someone so senior in this kind of organization look at it from that point of view, I thought was really, really interesting. It's not, we need more money or we need more this or we need more that. It's, come on guys, let's focus on, to a certain extent, it's what we're trying to do with this podcast, isn't it? Is let's focus on the positives as much as possible.
yeah,
While still being pragmatic and while being adult and understanding that sometimes things go wrong, but let's not make that the default, because there is and I think he's absolutely right. There is a sort of knock-on consequence of that. That if we start to get to the mindset of we can't deliver, sure enough, we won't. The other thing, I guess, with that is that it's one thing government as end client, but we're seeing in a number of parts of the sector at the minute that we have to be investable. Where there is private money coming in, where private sector is acting as end client, they have to have the confidence that ultimately this asset is going to be realized in the way that they intend for it
yeah,
to be, and that it's going to pay back. That's just the nature of the beast. And again, if we keep out sending the message that it's probably not going to happen on time, and it certainly won't happen to budget, or it won't happen in the way that we intend for it to initially, then why would you invest? So yeah, I think he's absolutely right. And there's a lot more in here besides, but that one particular angle I thought was yeah, resonant with kind of the way that you and I see the world, but just a slightly different take on that confidence message and what that might mean from a comms point of view.
yeah, and they interweave the report that they released in October, interviewing 100 senior people, major institutional investors, um, in terms of construction and what that means. And there was sort of three major recommendations that would really help. They thought in again infrastructure, but if we look at it from a built environment wider perspective, it also rings true. And that was de-risk, incentivize, and deliver. So
Mhm.
from a de-risk point of view, it's all about robust contract frameworks, which makes perfect sense, really. Going back to what we've just been talking about. Incentivize. So incentivizing investors, and they talk about innovation and innovation funding models. Again,
Mhm.
covered quite extensively on this podcast, the way we need to innovate and look at designing and building and creating, or even breaking down, more innovative in different ways, and also delivering. So a program about common outcomes, and they mentioned this thing called alliancing, which
Mm.
I never really heard of, but it makes perfect sense. So rather than a
Yeah.
main contractor sharing that project around tier one, tier two contractors and collaborating together on it. And if you look at other industries like the airline industry, that happens quite a lot in terms of safety. And if there is, some kind of issue or error or, God forbid, disaster in aviation, then they all come together and say, what happened? What was the
Mm.
problem? How do we make sure that never happens again? So I think we can learn a lot from that.
Yeah, makes perfect sense, and I think it's we speak about this a lot, and again, I think it's something that the sector needs to do more of outwardly. But thinking of how important these things are, we talk about them in the abstract, and you and I are probably guilty of it as well in terms of financial amounts, and some of the numbers that we talk about or the potential deliverables are so big as to kind of not feel real. But the assets that the sector is trying to build, they're hugely important to everyday life. I mean, I think,
Mm.
working together and learning those lessons and being able to project a more positive image internally and externally is it's to everyone's benefit ultimately, isn't it? So, yeah, I think that alliance point is a really, really good one. I also, I think spoke about the Heathrow Terminal 5 project last week or the week before, but I gather that was one of the things that they did there. Multiple contractors and an absolute army of different,
Mhm.
specialist subcontractors and manufacturers across the piece. Um, and tried to create one sort of unified brand and a one team mentality that apparently had a massive impact on the ability to deliver on projects. It's not this kind of fragmented sort of supply chain. It's we are all here to back in behind this one particular thing. Stories of people getting sort of Heathrow branded workwear and people wearing it as like almost fashion accessories and badge of honor type stuff. And obviously that can't happen on every project, but
No.
yeah, the kinds of projects that Chris Ball's talking about here and the stuff that exists within infrastructure pipeline that we've spoken about previously, I think yeah, there's a lot to be learned there in sort of looking backwards at the successful things that we have delivered, in being proud of those, whether we worked on them or not, but that shared pride as a sector, as
Mhm.
well as the lessons to be learned on the negatives, and then yeah, carrying those forward confidently, because at our best we are capable of absolutely smashing these things. It's yeah, it's a case of feeling buoyed and g'd up, and then having that clear sense of mission, and yeah, that should be there, shouldn't it?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. But and this is classic podcast segue in here, but we need to do that without being too delusional.
Hmm.
Uh, yeah, which moves very nicely onto our second topic, and this is by Develop Coaching's Greg Wilkes. It's from Construction Management, which is brought to you by CIOB. And the title or this headline is Why Construction Leaders Must Plan Without Delusion. Um, yeah, very similar to our first headline and our first discussion, really, but more of a um, more of a plan or a step by step here, so that instead of just Greg's whole point here is instead of just being optimistic and saying 26 is our year, we're going to smash it, this is going to be brilliant, 25's over, it's going to be a much better year. Actually, planning and asking the right questions to deliver a more prosperous 26. What did you take from this article?
Well, I guess confirmation bias ahoy, because it absolutely ties into one of my more recent obsessions that I think I've mentioned several times on this podcast. So apologies to anyone that actually pays attention to the nonsense I come out with, because yeah, it's going to be kind of Ryan Jones bingo a little bit. But you're back to reference class forecasting. We as humans have a tendency to over-index towards the positive, and I think that's where tying in with the first story, it's where budget overruns happen. It's where project overruns happen. It's where things don't quite get delivered because resource becomes an issue at a certain point. Is that yeah, we have a tendency to think that each project is discrete and unique, or in this case, each year that we plan for is going to be unique. We if the economy is only anticipated to grow by 1.7%, I think it was 1.8% we're
Mm.
forecasting this year. To have plans that, we're going to have 20-30% growth. Well, what makes you think that is true? Why would you outpace the economy by such a degree? Not saying it's impossible,
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, there's a thing called reference class forecasting where you which is I think Greg's alluding to several points in here, is that um, only by looking at very similar sets of circumstances and historic data and building up a picture from that can you get to something like a realistic forecast. And yeah, it's something that we have to be conscious of in order to fight our own natural instincts for over-indexing towards the positive. But yeah, it's a really, really fascinating piece, and I think great that Greg has broken it down into the practical steps that he has, because and I'm talking these like quite highfalutin sort of set theories and so on. The iron law of planning and all these kinds of things. Like they're interesting for a nerd like me, but what do they actually mean to someone whose job it is to plan construction workflows for the next 12 months? We said at the very, very start of this that we throw around lots of stats, particularly at this time of year, about this part of the sector and this supply chain and so on. What does that actually mean for you as a business? And I think for anyone that is still in planning stage at this point, really, really handy sort of practical guide here on sort of the best way to go about it. And I think a lot of the points raised are spot on.
If you look at it from a construction perspective, built environment perspective, and our lean towards looking at all the errors and the issues and the negativity and what went wrong, it's interesting in what he's saying in it, and what you're saying there, in that we always look more positively to the future, in what can be classed as almost a negative industry, from hyper focusing on the negative and not the positive projects that we've delivered. Uh, and quite simply, his whole premise here, really good how he's chopped it into sections, but his whole premise on each part is like, be honest with yourself.
Yes. Yeah,
And
yeah.
and and one thing that I've learned over the recent past is it's okay, and you should have those negative points in planning, in looking towards the future, and answer those questions, because that's where you can make a change, rather than, to your point, just saying we'll grow by X amount, when that is clearly really, really hard to do in a certain environment or economic time.
Oh, completely.
And yeah, go on.
Sorry, Peter, I was just going to say you're
Yeah.
absolutely right, and I think that to be clear from my part, that's the thing. It's the planning stage is the part to be critical and pragmatic. If you think we'll talk about tunneling projects and bridge projects and big pieces of infrastructure. Better to work those things out and get things wrong on paper and literally be at the drawing board, rather than have people on site digging holes and footings and everything else, and then realize, oh no, this isn't gonna pan out. I've read all kinds of things on deep drilling underwater tunnels connecting one mass of land with another, and literally those getting flooded because someone has gone in. That is a big, expensive problem to then try and fix, and in some cases, more cost effective to leave a half dug tunnel and all the machinery down there and then start again. And it's and this is where these massive, massive financial budget miscalculations come from. So
Mm.
I guess tying in with the first story, that scream from the rooftops about the successful projects and the delivery of those, but be pragmatic and be questioning and be critical in that planning stage. That's kind of the yin and yang of both. Better than the opposite way around, where you are over-indexed on the positive in the planning stage and crossing your fingers that this will work in that way, only to then be one of those negative headlines at the back end of things. Much, much better to question things up front and be pragmatic. So, yeah, I think one hand washes the other with these two stories, and yeah, I
Yeah.
think it's a really solid foundational piece to hopefully lead to some positive stories that we can shout about and increase that confidence in the sector at the back end, because nothing will lift that confidence quite like successful delivery, will it?
No, absolutely not. He ends with action point checklist, which
Mm.
is, I'm not going to read them all, but there's about 10 points that are essentially the basic premise for this article. The first one is audit last year honestly, no spin. So it's okay
Yeah.
to say you had a terrible year. It's okay to say it didn't go according to plan. In fact, that's probably the best thing you can do, because then you look at why it didn't go
Mhm.
according to plan. And then the final point he states is hold the line when pressure hits. And that is such a leadership thing to do. It's not a planned thing in terms of like admin and process thing. It's very much a leadership, because in an organization, you have to make sure everybody else is holding the line, not
Yeah.
just yourself. And to your point, if you're going to fail, fail on paper, and then make it so you are going to succeed on paper, and then you can hold that line,
Yeah.
which is critical.
Yeah, completely that, completely that. I guess tied to the first story, actually, my head goes to that outward display of confidence and what that means for the sector. But you're absolutely right. It's the same internally. You know, your people are going to be much more inclined to buy into, what you're trying to achieve as an organisation, and believe that what you're suggesting to them is going to happen this year is real and tangible. If you can find a pragmatic way to deliver, I think if we're talking about a couple of percentage points of growth, not to be sniffed at in the context of the macroeconomic numbers that we're talking about, like let's stick the landing on that rather than project
Mhm.
something crazy and fall short. And I think it's true on an individual business level. It's true for the sector as a whole. That yeah, I think a dose of realism. Realism doesn't mean negativity, by the way, but a
Yeah.
dose of realism and ultimately delivery against that, I think, is exactly what the sector needs. And I think it ties both these stories together quite nicely, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you are looking, if you are in a position of leadership, or you're looking to do that this year, check this article out, because it's just a really good step-by-step guide, or a sanity check to what you should be doing for the start of 26, or looking back for 25. He says start of 26. It's nearly Christmas, isn't it?
Oh well,
That's
again,
great.
selfish plug. Obviously, we will share the links to all of these. So
Mhm.
definitely dive into that. For anyone from the marketing part of the world listening to this, because again, we several clients from my agency that are just now starting to wrap up their budgetary backs and forths and shenanigans internally. We run a piece of research every year called Horizon that kind of looks at. And spoiler alert: marketers do tend to over-index on the positive every year, by the way. Um, but kind of ask the marketers within the construction and manufacturing space how they see the year ahead, kind of themes that they're working to, and how the mood seems within their organization. So yeah, I guess what we found was that a lot of clients don't necessarily have a peer-to-peer network and can feel a little bit isolated. So
Mhm.
yes, so we built this thing out so people can sort of, where that network doesn't exist, they can at least compare themselves against the median, and how positive do they feel relative to their peers in other organizations. So yeah, if Peter will allow, I'll also share a link to that. And
Yeah, for
yeah,
sure.
yeah, but please participate, and we'll share the research at a later date with you all. But yeah, it's the fourth year that we've run it, and it's been a really useful tool for a lot of people the last couple of years. So yeah, it's there if it's helpful.
Nice. Brilliant. Great work. And speaking of great work,
Mm.
we turn to HS2, which I never thought I'd say.
There's a sentence.
But maybe the tide is turning for HS2, as HS2 begins tunneling to central London. Now, this was on specification online. I'm not going to dig too deep into this, right? I'll let you take the lead. I just wanted to start, and I should really end with it. But Chief Secretary to the Prime Minister, Darren Jones, no relation, I'm guessing, uh,
There's a
as
lot of us.
I think he's going to be the winner of the 2026 strapline, or statement or comment award this year, with his "There's nothing boring about tunnel boring." Hey? Hmm? Hmm?
Well,
Do we like that?
in fairness, mate, I think you've picked up silver, because whether you intended to or not, I was laughing internally with we'll dig into this story. I was ready with my my comedy drum sound effect on that. But no,
Well,
you know what? Don't do it,
sorry,
please
sorry.
don't do it.
I'm not gonna. But speaking of which, we found out the platform that we utilize for our podcast does actually have sound effects, but I'm not going to use them, because and again, breaking all the rules of podcasting. Episode 100 is where I introduce right into these sound effects just before we recorded, and we had to pause for a couple of minutes while we composed ourselves before we hit record. So we're not going to utilize the sound effects just yet, because I don't think neither me nor Ryan could actually cope and continue if we started using them.
No, I was going to say the editing job it would give you afterwards would be headache inducing.
For sure. Anyways, back
But
to it.
no, but you raise a good point in terms of, surprised to be telling a positive story about HS2, but in all of the furore and fallout of the northern leg cancellation, well, I guess the key thing there is that it was just the northern leg cancellation, um, and maybe our geography being in the northwest sort of doesn't help in this regard, but so easy to forget that there's absolutely miles of trap laid. I know there's some back and forth about where the London leg is actually going to end and whether it's going to be in London. But the commitment now into Euston, and anyone like myself that's down into London fairly regularly will see that work ongoing as well. And nice to remind people that this, to our previous piece that we've just covered. Not in the way that it was intended to, not to budget, not to time, etc. However, this will be finished and completed, and if we can break it down into the micro, and this leg of the final tunneling piece, it's a very complex piece of work. It's it requires creating a lot of jobs for people. If we can deliver this bit successfully, give some positive headlines on sort of the final leg of the journey, as it were. And then kind of use that then to, we've an enormous infrastructure pipeline, as we keep talking about. And it needs back to the first article, it needs some confidence. This could be a really, really decent springboard for that. So, yeah, absolutely everything crossed that the teams behind this can stick the landing on this final phase of work. And per the article, they all sound positive. So hopefully they've been pragmatic and they've been negative in their planning, and they're following the good advice that we're sharing in that second piece. But Lord knows, I really, really want them to deliver on this, because I think I think it'd be a good thing for the sector en masse rather than just the people that are involved in the project.
Yeah, 2 years ago in 2024, Camden Council commissioned some independent research, and they found out that the economic benefit of transforming or the regeneration around Euston Station could contribute 41 billion to the UK economy, and that's just in in that area. That's phenomenal. I mean, it is by 2053. I don't want to know how old I'm going to be then, but yeah, we'll be on episode 1742 by then, and support 34,000 jobs. Now, I know that's quite a long time frame, but a really good piece of economic value really into the area, and it is into London, and that seems to be where we always end up. But having said that, if any project needed any positivity, if any project needed a tunnel boring machine to get things going, it certainly was HS2. And who doesn't love seeing a tunnel boring machine coming out the other end?
Again, nerd alert. I absolutely will. I'm sure new civil engineer, this is right up their street, isn't it? Once there's some video footage of these things in action, it will be there. I'm certain that we will share it. But I think, jokes aside, the fact that this is going to sound really, really ridiculous, but the fact that they are now committed to this making its way into Euston, into the heart of London, and not Old Oak Common, and sort of, again, the negative headlines there of this kind of, at the end of all of this wrangling and all of this investment and all this cross-party consensus over decades, and it not make its way into London would have been too much to handle, wouldn't it? And again, in all seriousness, the negative potential ramifications for the sector in terms of its self-confidence, in terms of its ability to recruit, in terms of its trustworthiness to investors, everything that we've discussed on this episode, that in and of itself, I think, is a massive positive. Let's like I say, let's fingers crossed that it's 4.5 mile journey, I think, that they've got to tunnel, which again, in the context of how big the project is, doesn't sound all that much, but it's technically a very, very difficult project that they're undertaking. But yeah, confidence levels seem high. The sound bites are all positive. Let's hope this is it.
Some tough old clay to get through to get to central London. So good luck with all that. So let's finish with our takeaway, shall we?
Yeah, well, I think mine probably comes from the second episode. Pardon me, the second piece, but has implications elsewhere. Is pragmatism doesn't mean negativity. You know, I think we're kind of negative looking in the rear view, um, and we kind of shouldn't be. Yes, we should learn lessons, but yeah, let's be pragmatic in our planning. There's a lot of exciting things for the sector. I've seen, again, we haven't even touched on this because we do a lot of house building stuff, but house building starts a lot more positive. It looks like that market's heating up. We know the infrastructure pipeline exists. We know that there's investment into education and to healthcare and so on. So yeah, I guess to the point of the first article and to what Chris was saying in there, that the money men, whether they're government or private sector, have kind of done their bit. It's over to us now. So yeah, let's not mess up this opportunity. Let's be pragmatic in our planning. Let's be sort of ambitious within reason. Let's learn from the lessons of the past, positive and negative. And yeah, it's I'm still in new year, new start mode, to be honest, Pete. I think it's all there for us. We've just got to
Yeah.
we've got to have a solid plan to deliver on it. And each of us having a solid plan within our own businesses is going to add up to a big impact overall. So it's not just some abstract, the sector needs to plan. It's on all of us that are in a position to influence these things to make sure that we're all doing our little bit. So yeah, I think that's the biggie this week for me.
Yeah, nice. Mine comes from the second headline as well, from Greg Wilkes, and it's just before he finishes the article, and it should be my takeaway. It's really his, and it's something that we should all remember and all learn from, and it's just three simple statements, which is cash flow is oxygen, program not hope, and margin not ego. There you go.
Let's leave it there.
Yeah. I think we should leave it there. I'd love to take credit for it, but that isn't my. I should just change the words around. ChatGPT will do that for me, and I'll put something, and everyone will think I'm an inspiration, won't they? So look out for that.
Works for me.
See you next week.
See you later.